I first met Joseph, I can't believe it's about 10 years ago, actually, at a First Nation youth elders water gathering in Sault Ste. Marie. And I was super impressed with um, just the amount of knowledge he had and how he was learning from um, his grandmother who's since passed, and the work he was doing and how he was connecting it to science, seeing the synergies with science as well. And as a young person taking this up, that's usually not what we're like. The broader education system is sort of like everyone must, pursue this kind of education as opposed to learning from community and elders and knowledge holders. And here Joe was taking up this work. So I don't know if I want to call it, I'm going to call it your life's work rather than a business, because I think it's not just a business, is the Creator's Garden. So you can Google Creator's Garden, lots of amazing, amazing material there. So I see that there's a lot of plant knowledge. That's sort of what I sort of associate Joseph with, like a lot of plant knowledge, medicine knowledge, but also birds now, delving into to the bird realm in terms of knowledge as well. So I invited him to speak to you because I think he'll really help you. Because I think about Joseph too as being a public educator. Like he just spends so much time trying to help people learn to engage, and his passion and love for the natural world and the health of people and well-being really comes through in the work that he does. Not only that, he's a great storyteller. So he's always really engaging and fun to listen to. So I hope you enjoy. I always learn a lot from him, and I have some, you know, some things to think about at the end. But I'm hoping that the class also will also have some questions for you as well. So Joseph, just as to introduce the class, and if you want people to just say who they are, you can do that as well. So this class is Indigenous Perspectives and Realities at Osgoode Hall Law School. A lot of second, third year students. Students are required at the law school to get their JD to take some kind of Indigenous course or have some kind of experience as part of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action in terms of what students should know by the time they leave law school about Indigenous people and laws and colonization and the impact of that. In this class, I'm trying to have students learn to connect to the natural world and start understanding how you can draw knowledge and laws from that. So their first assignment was to do a land acknowledgement. This one is more reflective in terms of actually, and this is very, like, they spent a month doing that. So this is like very intense learning for them that they kind of have to do on their own. They don't get to do it with me. So just so you know, sort of the context of the class and sort of what they've been asked to do, by me. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. I always talk way too much in this class, and and I'll turn it over to you and your Otter AI support person.
Here we go. Okay, well, yep, that's me. I'm Joe. I'm from Wikwemkong on Manitoulin Island. And yeah, I mean, I guess technically I only have a short time with everybody this morning, so I want to be able to cover as much as I can, so I'll just jump right into her. So kind of wanted to introduce myself a little bit, but also kind of bring in a couple different perspectives that I think is important for everybody to understand. Well, one of the things that I like telling everybody is just like how everything started for me. So mainly right now, I am a learner and I guess now educator about Anishinaabe Aadziwin, about our medicine knowledges, how to use different plants as medicine. So kind of like Deb was saying earlier about birds, I didn't really, well, I don't really like plants all that much. And it's kind of funny. I have like 300 different plants behind me. Yet this seems to be the case. This was just kind of put on my lap by my grandma and by a couple of really neat experiences. So I'll share that in a minute. But one of the things that I really like are birds. So I've been doing trying to incorporate that into our education process, creating different educational materials to teach about language and bird names and Anishinaabe taxonomy of living things. It's been really fun. Uh, those will be all on our website soon. I'm really excited for that. But yeah, I never really cared for plants. I did a presentation like a couple weeks ago to like a horticultural society. Number one, I had no idea that there's so many horticultural societies. Like, and those people, there was like 800 people in the presentation. Um, those people like plants. Those people like live and breathe plants. And technically, I guess I wasn't born with that kind of a responsibility for plants. But yeah, I was just kind of put on my lap because for me, I used to be like when I was in high school, I used to be real bad when I was in high school. And I failed. I was always failing everything or just barely passing. Like even grade 12 English, I did 5 times in the fall, winter, summer, fall, and winter, and I failed 5 times because I had 48% on my last time. And then I was already on my 5th year of high school, so I threatened my teacher. Uh, said, "Well, if you if you don't pass me, then I'm gonna be in your class next year." And then he passed me. So I got real lucky there. But just pretty bad all throughout high school, and always partying and stuff. And then for some miraculous reason, kind of identified my culture, my language. I have a really amazing family. My family, we all hunt, we fish, we trap, we have big gardens, like we do all of the cool stuff. And so I started to find that, and I went on a fast and started going to sweats and doing all this cool like cultural stuff. And then everybody, my whole family was like real proud of me because I went from being real bad to now I'm kind of like turning into a good boy. So everybody was like, "Oh, cool." And then all the while this is happening, I met I met somebody, um, and that somebody, it was or is like she's white, uh, and like real white, like not even possible, you know. And so my family sees me being real bad, finds culture and language, and then becomes really good. And then I started bringing a white woman around. So my family was like, "You should find somebody from around here." not not going around all over. You should find somebody from here. Keep the bloodline strong. And so we got all of that experience, and I was real sad because my ultimate plan was for me to make my wife fall in love with my family, so that she didn't just stay with me because of me, but she stayed with me because my family is real awesome. All of the hunting, the fishing, the trapping, all the big massive gardens and all the cool stuff that we do. So I just wanted her to see that. And then that provides me with, in our relationship, maybe some insulation. And so I was really looking forward to that, but my family was like, "No." Uh, so I identified one person in my family who probably wouldn't act that way, and that was my grandma. So me and my wife are like rocking our first couple dates, just going to visit my grandma, and I wanted my wife to see how awesome my grandma was, and so we just got her to tell all kinds of fun stories. And for me, the way that all of this happened is my most fascinating and interesting thing about my grandma's life is that she did not have access to a hospital. When she was raised and when she was raising some of her children, she didn't even have a car yet. So I think she was like 15 when the first car came into Wiki. Uh, and then other crazy stuff too, like just for that kind of perspective, I don't think my grandma, she saw money until she was like 12. Her mom was hanging clothes on the line and she was watching her mom, and then her mom started to get real uh, acting careful with some kind of a clothing, and so she noticed her mom's attention changed, and she's wondering what's she doing, and she was being real careful with this little cloth and put it on the clothesline so it can dry. And then my grandma was thinking, who the heck would wear something like that? So she asked her mom, and then her mom was like, oh no, that's money. And then had to explain like what money was. And like she's already like preteen, you know? So I was like just fascinated with the life that my grandma lived. And the most interesting portion of that was how she didn't have a doctor or she didn't have a hospital. It was, you know, they didn't even have horses either, like my grandma and her mom. So if something happened, like you can't go knock on your neighbor's door. Oh, you know, oh, my daughter, she was in an accident, she fell, she's bleeding everywhere. I need to tack up your horses and hook up the wagon, and that'll only take maybe about an hour and a half. And then I'll put my daughter on the wagon, and then we'll go to the hospital. That'll take about 3 hours. And then by the time we get there, maybe she still has a little bit of blood. Like, that's not how it works. The way that it worked for my grandma is if you ever got sick or injured, you had to have your medicine to be able to fix yourself. So for them and for my grandma's perspective, it was that you know, if you're hungry, you have to know how to cook to feed yourself. And if your clothes rip, you only have one set of clothes. So if your clothes rip, you have to know how to sew up the rip so it doesn't get bigger. And if you ever get sick or injured, you have to know what kind of medicines you need to be able to fix yourself. So for my grandma's understanding, it was like really simple. It was just a normal part of life. It was just like, well, you kind of have to know. um like even now, you know, when we learn, well, I'll go through all kinds of different medicines with everybody, but when you I remember I went to go and visit this like a medicine person in Wiki, one of our last really strong kind of medicine people. His name was Ronnie Okigijik, and I got to see him. He was palliative at home, but I got a couple good visits in, and uh, um, he said, you know what? He was like, I have a medicine I'll share with you. He said, you get all these different types of bark and you mix them together and you make a bath. And that bath, he said, in my experience, which was like at that point over almost 60 something years of clinical experience using medicines in a you know Western healthcare facility. So he got tremendous experience, and he was like, in all of my experiences, this has been the medicine that has never failed me for any skin problem, eczema and psoriasis and scars and rosaceas and unknown rashes and hives and like whatever. He's like, it always works. So he named off that the barks to put into that medicine. And then I brought it to my grandma and I was like, look at what Ronnie taught me how to make. He said, like, this is the ultimate medicine for your skin. In all of his experience, it never has failed him before for any skin problem. And my grandma looked at the bark that I used and she was like, oh, well, that's good. I was like, oh, well, what do you mean? Like, isn't it cooler than that? And she was like, no. Well, I mean, that's good that it works. For me, when I was growing up, that was just a bath. That's how that when it was bath time, that's what my mom would make. So it was just a bath. Now, yeah, sure, it can be a really good medicine. We access it as a form of intense therapy for autoimmune conditions and all of these different things. And so, but she was like, this was just a bath for me. So I think one of the really important ideas that I want to illustrate all day is that these medicines and the art of using medicine was just a normal part of everyday life. So something that everybody always had or had to have because you needed it for sickness and injury, or you will die. So for my grandma, it was just a really simple thing. And so like when I met my wife and we were visiting with my grandma, I wanted her to hear all of my grandma's coolest stories. And for me, it was how she grew up without a doctor, without a hospital. So and so I would ask her to tell my wife all the crazy stories about using plants. uh and like one of my favorites that that I really like to share is about my uncles. They had this behind their house. You know, when you were growing up, the house was just where you slept. Basically, when you woke up, you go outside and play all day. And you know, she had like 9 kids in total. And so once everybody was awake, they just went out and played all day. And the only rules, if you're at the water, you have to have somebody older with you. And then don't play where the barn burned down. They had this giant barn that burned down. There was massive nails everywhere. So the story was, if you played at that barn, there's a little bug that lives on the rust, and that bug will get in your body and kill you. So don't play over there. And I have 2 uncles. They were real bad too. And that was their favorite spot to go and play. And so they were playing at this barn, and one of my uncles stepped on one of those nails, and it almost went through his whole foot. He saw the nail poking on the top, and then pulled his foot off, and he didn't feel any pain, but he was just crying away because he knew he was going to get in trouble. And then um, my grandma, she was hanging clothes on the clothesline, and then she hears crying right from where that barn was. So she knew what happened. So when my uncle came, it was lots of blood coming out of his feet. And one thing we know, you know, probably from growing up, having parents, or if you are parents yourselves, one of the things that I know, our daughter is 9 now, and so we know that it's not necessarily the punishment that hurts. It's that anticipation period from when you commit the act to when you receive your punishment. That's the real torture. That's the real punishment. And so, you know how your parents will make you wait to tell you, hear what your punishment is actually going to be. That's what my grandma did to her son. He was bleeding out of his foot, and she kept hanging clothes on the line and yelling at him, "You shouldn't play over there. I told you not to go over there. Now you might die." And so she's hanging clothes on the line, just talking to him like that. And meanwhile, he's sitting he's making like his blood is mixing with all of the dirt, and he's making like a puddle of mud. And I guess, you know, my grandma was just so confident and understood so well, that it seems terrible, but she said, "You'll understand when you have kids." It's not that bad. Because she grabbed on one of the trees holding the clothesline was a spruce tree. So she grabbed off some of the resin, some of that oozy, sticky gum that comes out of the tree. She grabbed that, bigyu, we call it. So she grabbed that bigyu, and what you do is you massage that. The type of on spruce trees, either the sap comes out and it's really sticky, but then eventually it turns into like a really hard kind of crystal. And that's what you have to grab. So it feels like you're massaging a rock. It feels kind of silly. But eventually that rock gets a little tacky. And then once it gets a little bit of, it becomes a little bit malleable, she was able to kind of form it into a little pad, put it on his foot, then all the blood stops immediately. And then she wrapped it up. He lies down. The car has no headlights. So in order for them to go to the hospital at this point, they got to wait until tomorrow. And she said, "You're probably going to be real sick before we get to the hospital. That bug is going to start to try to kill you while you sleep. So, you know, you got to be really careful throughout the night. And so, and my uncle was like 4 or 5. He was as tall as the grass. That's how he said, like a grass in the field, not like the lawn. I was telling that story to kindergarten kids, and they were like, "Ever small, your uncle?" Because they thought I was talking about like regular grass, but like the grass in the field. So he was just small, and they went to the hospital the next day, and then Dr. Bailey, it was his first week being a doctor. Then he's taking off the bandage, and then he looks at my uncle's foot because it looks horrible, like that spruce resin. It smells really good though, so she could see that it smells interesting, but it looks awful. There's like bugs inside of it. There's dirt, and she didn't even clean his foot before she put that on. She just put it on, so his foot is all covered in dry blood, mud, dirt stuff. And so he took off that spruce gum, and then he looked at it, and then he looked on my uncle's foot, and then he looked at my grandma, and then he just put it back, wrapped it up, and he was like, "You should just go home." He was like, "I don't know what that stuff is, but if you had come here even yesterday," he was like, "I probably would have had to amputate his foot because there's no way you can clean out all of the little rust pieces. There would be no way you could clean that out. An infection would set in, and you'd have to amputate it anyway. So I would have probably took it off yesterday." But he was like, "That whatever you put on that cut," he said, "all of the rust is in there." He said, "I looked at it, and there was all of the rust, all of the dirt. It pulled it all. I don't know what that is. Go home. Keep doing that." And so that was my grandma's experience with the hospital. They just told her to go home. Even my grandma and her mom, like their role in my community, they were midwives, and their responsibility, they were really good at that job. Like there's a bunch of stories of people, they would shake their family tree till somebody from Wiki fell out my community, and then so that they could move to Wiki and be under my grandma and her mom's care while they went through pregnancy and birthing and everything. So they were really good at their job. Then my grandma she was pregnant. She was about halfway through her kids. She was pregnant with my mom. And she says, "Oh, we should try the hospital. That's where everybody goes now to have the kids. So maybe we'll try over there." So they went to the hospital to go have their baby. They had all the other ones at home. And I guess she tells the nurse, "Hey, my baby is coming right now. So go get the doctor, I guess." And my I guess there was a accident that night, like a house burned or something, so everybody was busy, all the doctors were busy, and the doctor never came into her room. So my grandma just had my mom on her own after birth, everything. She's breastfeeding on my mom, and then the nurse came in and she was like, "Oh, you were right, the baby was coming." My grandma was like, "Well, I try to say and you never came, so I'm okay." And then they went home, and then my grandma was like, "They didn't even help me over there." Why would I? And they left all the lights on. It's cold, it's uncomfortable. I'm just gonna stay home. Like that was her experience going to the hospital. Always was like, "Oh, I'm better off here, I guess." And so me and my wife would like, I would just ask her to tell all the coolest stories about using plants. And then my wife was like, "You like plants?" I was like, "No, I just think those stories are cool." But I at this point, I magically somehow was accepted into a post-secondary program. My mom was a registered nurse growing up, always continuing her education as well. So I grew up with a certain language in my home and health literacy, I guess. And so I had those ideas kind of built into my head. And so like going through high school, even though I failed everything, I still wanted to pursue a career in health sciences. So I thought if I get my GED, upgrade all of my high school grades so that I could get it. That might take 2 years. Then I'll go into a 2-year program, pre-health sciences. Then that might get me into like a PSW program I'll do that for a couple of years, and then I'll get a couple of years of experience so that I could go into a nursing program. And then when I get a couple of years of nursing under my belt, maybe I could continue my education and get a degree. And then maybe with just a degree and those experiences, I could apply for medical school. But I'd probably have to, you're better off actually satisfying a PhD to be able to enter into the medical schools that I was looking at anyways. And so I was mapping out, and then I thought, oh, okay, maybe by the time I'm like 45, I'll be able to be a physician, then I'll be able to help. And so I already kind of knew like, maybe that's not going to happen. So I got into a college for classical guitar because I guess I was really good at guitar, because I auditioned everywhere, and everybody could not accept me because my transcript was too terrible. Except at Cambrian College in Sudbury, I did that audition, but I did real good. And then that guy was like, who did you study with? I was like, oh, I just listened to tape, YouTube, old tape recorders, and then that's how I learned. And so, oh, you're that's a gifted. You have to come here. And I said, oh, but my transcripts are real bad, so I don't know if I'm actually gonna get if you could do that. And he was like, no, I'll get you in. I'll find a way to get you here. And so I was in school for classical guitar, and it was awful. It was nothing that I wanted to do. So I failed everything. Kind of abandoned ship. And I told, my parents, my whole life was always like, post-secondary education, get a career. Like, so that's what I have to do. And here I was failing everything. I have absolutely no chance. And then I didn't want my parents to be mad at me. So I said, well, you know what? We just lost like two of our most significant medicine people in Wiki, Ronnie Wakigishik, Derek Pitawanakat. They're dead now. And so all of what they know is gone with them. Oh, and then there was other ones too who know their medicines, that they passed away. So I said, I should be spending this time with Mama. I should learn from her medicine so that it doesn't just leave with her. She might be the last significant medicine person in our community. So my parents were like, okay. So I got my get out of school free card. But I had to, commit. So we were going to visit my grandmother specifically to understand more about medicine. So one of the things that we did was I would go out. I wonder if I have that in here. Oh yeah, right there. Okay, so I went out. The way that we started learning is we just asked my grandma, hey, Mama, is there any kind of medicines that you want to connect with, that you had when you were a kid, you want them now? She said, oh yeah, there's one plant. It's called galgabons, and you have that if you have aches, like when you have a fever, and those fevers, they come with aches, and where you don't even want to have clothes on, no sheets or nothing, your skin just hurts. And she said, we have a medicine for that. It's called galgabons, and it's really important because like if you're planting a garden and the seedlings, a seed will take like 2-3 weeks to germinate, and then the seedling pops up. And when the seedling pops up, you have to water them every day, multiple times a day, because if that seedling dies, the whole plant dies. And if you get a cold or a flu and you have those aches and you can't work, you can't water your garden, you lose, you don't have any garden, you don't have any food for the whole year. So you have to continue to work or you'll die. So it's very important to get rid of those aches as fast as possible so that you can continue to work. And so she said, that's a very important plant. You should go and get that. Everyone should have that, she'll say. Oh, okay. What's its English name? She says, oh, there's no English names for that's just Anishinaabe. They don't have that in English yet. I was like, oh, well, how about you just describe the way that it looks? And so she was like, okay, well, it's small and it's green, and it has leaves on the top and then sometimes leaves on the middle, and it's green. And me and my wife were like, what about the flower? Oh, there's no flower. Seeds or fruits? No, not just leaves on that. And she says it's Galkake means that it never changes. So Galkake bak means those leaves, those leaves will never change. They're always the same. So even in the winter when you dig it up, it's bright green. So she said, you should find that. I need that. So me and my wife are cruising around in the forest on Manitoulin Island, and we're looking for a small green plant. It was a terrible description. So I brought my grandma all kinds of plants that I was wrong. I brought her all of the wrong plants. But the way that my whole kind of knowledge acquisition story kind of began with all of these mistakes, I'd bring her the wrong plant, but she would sit there and she would look at that plant and remember what that plant was. Sometimes we would leave her plants for like 2 weeks, and she'd be like, 2 weeks later, come and visit me. I can share with you about that one. So we would go and visit with her, and then the mistake plant that we brought, she'd be able to tell us all about it. Oh, I know. My mom used to say this. My mom used to say this. And my mom used to say this. So I'm getting like third-hand information. It's not even like my grandma doesn't have much experience with these. It's just what her mom said. And I realized now that, that's probably not the most reliable way to achieve data. But and then even the how do you say, the reputation that my grandma's mom had was that she was like perhaps mentally ill, because she would just remember, no cars, no horses, no money. They walk everywhere. She walked to work every day, and that was like 25 kilometers. She'd go clean at the hotel and then come back, and in her 70s. So I mean, like, solid 40, 50K every day. It's pretty ridiculous. But anyways, her mom would just walk through the forest and mumble to herself. So anytime somebody saw her go by, she was always talking to nobody. And my grandma, she would be with her mom, and she kind of realized at some point that she's not just mumbling to herself a bunch of nonsense, talking to herself. She's talking to everybody around her. And so she said, my mom would just walk, and she would see a plant or a tree and say, hey, I know who you are. When I was a kid, I had flu aches from a sickness, and you took all of that pain away so quickly in the first couple sips. I know what you can do. I know what your gift is, and and I know who you are. You're a heart medicine, and I know you're a heart medicine because somebody came to my mom when I was a kid with a heart problem, and I watched you fix it. And then look at you. I know you over there. You're a lung medicine. You're a liver medicine. And so my grandma just kind of tuned into what her mom was saying, and all of the stories and all of the knowledge that she was walking past was an acknowledgement of all of the knowledges that she was experiencing in those moments. And she was just saying everything loud. And so my grandma could hear. And that's essentially how I learned about medicine. Was I'd bring plants to my grandma, and she would just say, no, that's the wrong one, but I know what that is. My mom said this. So yeah, it's just like all second, third hand information. It's not like my grandma had those experiences herself. She hasn't seen these plants since she was like 6 in a lot of cases. So here's me and my wife cruising around in the bush looking for a little green plant, and eventually we found it. I actually dug it up under snow for the first time. But this is called galgebons. And it's just kind of like you know, it can grow. Oh, my little helper there, helping me get a. That was actually a good haul that day. The plant is not tremendously common, but it's pretty easy to help spread. So there's a lot more. And there's a bunch of plants that look like just like it. Like you see that one in the background, the little wintergreen there, with the more round leaves, but it's still short, green, shiny. Like there's so many lookalikes. This heath family of plants is massive, and sometimes can be hard to differentiate between species. But we eventually found it, took it to my grandma and said, and so when she saw it, the second she saw it, that's it. That's what I need in case she has a flu. And so she was really happy with that. But essentially what happened was we would go out and pick a bunch, give it to my grandma, and then we would try some of the tea ourselves. And then we would have a little stash, you know, in case we get flu aches as well. Those suck, so might as well have some. But what happened was like just real simple small town stuff. Everybody just started to find out somehow that I found this plant and that I have a little stash. People would knock on my door like, hey, can I have that? And they would bring gifts. So in the Anishinaabe culture, we don't really accept medicine as a trade item, or sorry, money as a trade item for medicines. It's like, I don't know how to say taboo. I don't know if that's a bad thing to say, but that's the reputation that exchanging money has for medicine with us. So we trade, we barter. And so like I got pickles and mustard beans and maple syrup. Like I still have some from like 14 years ago. So like everybody started to realize that I was finding some of these medicine plants and that I had a little stash. So they would just come and knock on my door and they wanted some. So they would trade, and sometimes they'd trade a little gas money too, you know, really help me out. So that was kind of cool. But mostly that's how I would just give people medicines, and then and then I would see them in the community a couple days later or a couple weeks later, and they would say, "Thank you so much for that medicine. That really helped. That fixed me right up." So I, you know, want to hear more, like what happened, what type of infection was it, and you know, how much tea did you have? Like I would kind of tease out the detail, just like just passing somebody at the grocery store. And so they would have this amazing story about how that medicine helped them. So then the momentum began, and the more medicines that I learned about from my grandma, the more community experience that I had, I would actually see that that medicine actually works. With this one in particular, with the Galkukepagos, this is Prince's Pine, or Pipsissewa is the common name. Pipsissewa is the Cree name for it, which is not actually English. Vis-a-vis, it just means that the leaves break up into a small particle. But anyways, the Latin name is Chemophilia umbellata. Chemophilia umbellata, and yeah, it was some really amazing experiences that I had were with fibromyalgia. So when people started to get this medicine off of me and it helped with their flu aches, well, when you have fibromyalgia, it feels a lot like flu aches, and so people with fibromyalgia came and got the medicine off of me, had one cup of tea, and their fibromyalgia was gone. So I was like, how in the heck can that happen? Fibromyalgia is like almost impossible to even just diagnose. Now it's much easier, but back then, 14 years ago, it was pretty difficult to diagnose fibromyalgia. But you had these people that were like, well, it's gone, it's over. I just had a cup of tea, and then it never came back. It's all gone. And I already lost this much weight or something like this. Some, you know, additional comorbidity components have been reduced. And so I was like trying to think of, well, how, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go like JW style. I'm just going to knock on everybody's door who I know has fibromyalgia. I'm just going to give them that medicine, and then we'll just see what happens. And now university calls that unethical, but that's what I did. Just connected people with all of these different plants, and that was their experience. Was that worked? I had a cup of tea, and then it was over. So I started to realize that, well, this is really important. This is really important for us to learn. like single-handedly, I almost eradicated fibromyalgia from the whole community. The health center was trying to get on board with what we were doing as well. You know, some political issues get in the way of, you know, using plants as medicine is seen to be quite dangerous, and so there was lots of issues there. But I realized really early on that it's probably not, how do I say, like probably not like at really early on when I was making medicines for people, that's all I did. And there was no way that I could be the only one providing medicine for my whole community. It's probably better if I just teach a group how to make it, because a lot of the times it's very easy to do. You just gotta walk and hopefully have like a expert there to know you're identifying plants properly. Like it's pretty simple. So let's start teaching large groups. And when I started teaching large groups, like I remember one of our first groups, we taught how to make a arthritis medicine. My grandma told us how to make that. You cook medicines inside of an oil, then you rub that oil on. So we used coconut oil, and then that makes like a salve and ointment you put on arthritis. And then I got that idea because there was a lady at the grocery store. I gave her that medicine like 2 months before I saw her at the grocery store, and she was like, "Hey, I have something funny to tell you. Remember on my finger?" She was like, "Look." Because her finger was crooked and it pointed off in the wrong direction, and she can't bend it. So when she drinks, it's like her finger is really crooked. And she said it's been like that for 30 years from an injury. And she said, whenever I point at something, I spent 30 years pointing. I have to point my hand this way to point at something straight. And she was like, now my finger is straight. So I still go like this and I point on the wrong way. Then everybody looks and not where I'm pointing. And she's like, I have to learn that my finger is straight and that I go like this. And so me and my wife are like, at this point, fibromyalgia was fun. Some of the other lung medicines and women's medicines we made, we were getting all of these cool experiences. And then the arthritis one was like, oh, that finger is straight now. So now it seems like miraculous in the literal sense of the term. So then we became really hooked. I'm going to teach a group how to make this medicine. I taught 26 people how to do it in just a couple of days. Those 26 people made it for their families. And in case you didn't know, arthritis is the #1 disease that affects First Nations groups by a landslide. Diabetes is #2, but it's so well below the incidences of arthritis. So in my community, we had the Arthritis Society of Canada had such a strong demand and continuously coming back to my community bi-weekly for workshops on exercises, food and nutrition kind of things that can help, how to hide your prescription pain medication from people who want it for recreational use. They had just came and did all kinds of workshops. They had such a demand in our community. They were there twice a week, every single week for the whole year. When we taught that group how to make that medicines or that arthritis medicine, nobody showed up to their workshops. So their demand went down to once a month, to seasonal or quarterly, and then biannually. And since then, it's been almost 10 years or 11 years since the Arthritis Society of Canada has ever been in our community, because I just taught a group how to do it. And we're all doing it ourselves, and it's over. So it was kind of experiences like that were like, well, I always have to be doing the best that I can with the gift that I was given by my grandma. And so we started to teach groups, and then other communities would make us go and teach groups over there. They would pay us to do that. All the while, me and my wife were just on social assistance. We were on welfare the whole time. Just eating porridge and peanut butter and walking in the forest looking for plants that fit my grandma's terrible descriptions. But when we started to become paid to teach groups how to make medicines, then it became, it satisfied a business model portion of it. And now, really quickly, we were we needed like 3 oil changes every month. We were traveling everywhere, teaching groups all over how to make medicines. And everywhere we went, my job is to have the maximum impact that I can. I became obsessed with that and still am, to do the best that I can with the gift that my grandma gave me. And so anytime that we're met with a barrier, or that we reach a barrier that is preventing access to healthcare, we break it. Like even in one community was really fun. It was religion. They have such a strong religious authority in this one community I was going to. They hired me to meet with their religious authority to discuss the appropriate nature of using plants as medicine, because it's witchcraft in the way that they understand it. So I had to learn a lot about theology and about the Bible, and so to be able to have that discussion. But we did, and now this community is successfully engaging in a significant amount of plant medicine. So every time we're met with a barrier, we break it so that everybody can have access to this really incredible form of therapy. Because at this point, we're seeing, now I'm teaching large groups. Those groups are giving those medicines away to their entire families. And when I go back to that community, they tell me all of the stories about what happened when they used that medicine for these sorts of problems. And so I started collecting this massive anecdote of experiences, this huge story began. I started to see that that's what I was collecting. And it's anecdote that drives scientific inquiry. So as I was creating this and harvesting as many of these stories as possible, I saw it as being probably at some point in my career very valuable, perhaps as a just drive a proper scientific inquiry, because I was quite naive at the time. And what happens is the biggest barrier that prevents Indigenous people to accessing Anishinaabe to accessing the plant medicines is our physicians. College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, CPSO, they create guidelines and policies, guidelines that physicians have to follow. If you don't follow them, you're stripped and sued probably. And so they follow these pretty carefully. One of those policies on alternative medicine is quite vague in that it says that physicians are supposed to support alternative forms of medicine. But in that, there's a clause, a part D, that says if the alternative form of medicine is not evidence-based, then it must not be supported. So you get now a physician who is looking at somebody wants to use Anishinaabe, and the physician has to say, you can't. I can't support that. And if you want to use traditional medicine, I have to withdraw treatment. And with that process, at this point in time, 10, 12 years ago or something like that, people were dying. One girl her story got quite the publicity, I guess. Her name was Michaela. I think she was from Six Nations, but the physician withdrew treatment, and she died. And so, everybody's lawsuiting each other and everybody's fighting about it. And all I could see is that this is actually kind of like a really simple problem. If there is no evidence to support plant medicines, then if I could just find evidence that supports it. And so that's what I did. One of the things that I would do is look at plants like this, the Skaggabrons, and you could find tons of evidence. The first way that I tried to do this is to look at all of these different plants and say, well, I wonder if this has been studied before. Has anybody looked at this plant and possibly like the constituents it has, and the physiological effect of those? Because wouldn't that count as evidence? So I would consult with drug discovery research, finding out really amazing things, like over 85% of every pharmaceutical drug that has ever been discovered comes from plants, but not from the Amazon, not from traditional Chinese medicine or from European plants. The plants that are and have been the models for creating the pharmaceutical drugs that we use have always been plants from the Great Lakes region, from Anishinaabe, from our territory. So with this one, this is Chemophilia umbellata is the Latin name, like I said earlier. And they discovered this plant has an alkaloid in it called chemophilin, or they named chemophilin. They named it after Chemophilia umbellata. It'd be really nice if they named it like Galgagabagosophyllin or something, like after the Anishinaabe name it had for however many thousands of years, but they named it chemophilin. And chemophilin has been in the drug discovery spotlight for a long time. And what it is it's called a cyclooxygenase enzyme inhibitor. And so when you're sick and your body's fighting off a virus, one of the things that your body will turn on is the production of this enzyme, cyclooxygenase. That enzyme eats away at every little fiber of your body, turning on, sparking every pain receptor, inflammatory responses. And that's what keeps you. The only advanced theory that kind of makes sense about why your body does this is to keep you in bed. You generally produce that enzyme at the point where you are now producing and delivering antibodies, which is really energy exhaustive. And so your body will produce this enzyme that just makes everything terrible. Also, inflammation mobilizes, your immune system moves very fast in water or in inflammation. So the more inflammation your body has, the quicker your immune system can be for nullifying an infection of some sort. So your body produces this enzyme eats everywhere, turns on all this inflammation, sparks every pain receptor, just eats away at every little fiber of your body, keeping you in bed so you don't move. And so you have the energy to create and deliver antibodies. That's the idea. And fibromyalgia is simply an inappropriate expression of cyclooxygenase enzymes. It's basically if you get sick, your body turns on those enzymes, and then when you recover from the infection, your body cannot turn that lever off all the way. So there's always a little bit of cyclooxygenase enzymes eating away at everything in your body and causing a little bit of pain all the time. Obviously, to varying degrees, how far that switch is turned off. Some people have much worse fibromyalgia than others because of that variety. But all this medicine does, they identified one chemical in particular, they named it chemophilin, it was an alkaloid that shuts off that enzyme production. So it's over. And then what they do in the whole drug discovery process, they take that one chemical and map out its mechanism of action. So figure out exactly what that chemical does in the body, and then create a synthetic mimetic, a chemical analog of the plant chemical. And then that chemical analog will go in through the RCT process to become an evidence-based practice of, supporting people with fibromyalgia or flu aches. Chemophilia umbellata, the Galgabagos that I keep showing the video of, that drug discovery process is responsible for creating ibuprofen, naproxen, or Advil and Aleve, and other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs that we're probably all very well aware of. I think Advil alone is like a $2.5 billion industry annually. But you could see, like, it's just copying what plants are doing. Like this whole process, and they're not even copying exactly what the plant is doing. They're creating a synthetic mimetic that is it's a profitable endeavor. Meaning if they create synthetics that work just as good as the plant, but it's not profitable, then it's not pursued. Which is the case most of the time. Biotechs are able to make chemicals that copy exactly what the plant is doing, but to produce those chemicals, it's not profitable, and so it's not pursued. So there's a lot of failed drug discovery research. Those are my favorites. But you could see just with this one process that there is a lot of evidence. I mean, you're just trying to copy what one chemical in the plant is doing, and you're not even able to do it and fully usually. Like Galgabagos has like 170 different chemical constituents that work in a synergy to be able to help with that particular type of pain. And you're taking one of those and you're not even able to copy that exactly. So is that evidence enough to share that, this is something that we're literally going to the source of where your idea of medicine comes from? We're going to the source of it, and we're not allowed to do that. And turns out evidence was defined at that point as an RCT, a randomized controlled trial, a study that is properly designed, properly controlled, tenured, randomized clinical trial. It has to be all of those things, and that's how we form what evidence is. Because I even spent years, check this out, this one with tamarack is we call it, Larix laricia. We use this bark. I use this bark and I make tea with it. So I'll go get a bunch of tamarack trees, scrape off a bunch of bark, and then I cook that bark for a couple days. And what we do, it's a nerve medicine. My grandma says this supports all of the light and the vehicles that light transports on in your body. Tamarack fixes those. So nerve issues. And in indigenous communities, one of the interesting things with diabetes is your nerves are a primary glucose disposal site. So you usually have a lot of nerve damage in the form of peripheral neuropathy. You have no feeling in your feet, or your feet are in tremendous amounts of pain. And so when we soak people's feet, you can have absolutely no feeling in your feet for a decade. You put your feet into this tea, and in a half hour, you feel temperature change. In an hour and a half, you feel pins and needles. And after 3 hours, I get the nurses to do a prick test, and we're able to identify pretty easily that every participant, usually like 80, between 50 and 80 participants, all have sensation throughout their whole foot. So this was my attempt at like, there's your evidence. I showed you. And in 3 hours, everybody walked home. And I've done this with thousands of people across the province in an effort to display the evidence-based practice that Anishinaabe, kind of should be occupying. But it wasn't controlled, and it wasn't tenured, and it wasn't the properly designed study, and so it doesn't serve as evidence. And so this frustrates the snot out of me. And that's still actually where my biggest battle is right now, is in how we need to change and redefine those. Just recently, in the last couple of weeks, I finally got through to CPSO, and it turns out they changed what evidence is in the last couple of years, and they call evidence as, or they leave evidence at the discretion of the physician. So the physician decides what is evidence and what is not now. So with that change, hopefully I get a next and good chapter under my belt in looking at all of these different barriers and how to break them all down to be able to reconnect us to a very valid form of therapy. And so that's kind of like, yeah, my whole experience so far has been, so I have I guess, and what I want to be able to do with everybody today is to kind of look through all of the different plants that we use and kind of go through that whole process of oh yeah, no, wait, that's not what I was going to do. I just wanted us to understand that the way that I learned about medicine was from my grandma, who heard about a story that happened to somebody else. And that eventually has graduated into this position now where, we're using all different types of medicines with massive populations of groups, haven't had one bad experience with it yet. So far, with the tens of thousands of people we reach at multiple points throughout the year, I think that it's so far it's been quite safe of an experience. Never had one person complain about a contraindication or anything like this. So that's been my kind of like claim to fame, I guess, is really looking at all the different chemistry that a plant has and understanding what each one of those chemicals, the hundreds or sometimes thousands of studies that have been done on that one particular chemical to elucidate all of its physiological functions, and then doing that with the 100 or 200 chemicals inside of each plant, and then now with maybe 3 300 different plants we use as medicine. I've kind of worked to create that is my repertoire that I'm generally always drawing from, is all of the drug discovery research that has taken place. And what I really wanted to be able to share with everybody today is, if we could just understand that alone, 85% of every pharmaceutical drug that has ever been discovered coming from plants, not from plants that are from in other parts of the world, but plants from Anishinaabe, from right here, are responsible for forming that industry. And so in a very real way, the entire world gestures to Anishinaabe Aadziwin, gestures to our medicine knowledge, is very responsible for creating this entire system that we all rely on. So in a way, the whole world looks to the Great Lakes for medicine. And then even on top of that, you have, I had these two really cool experiences in Central South America, where there are stories and understandings when communities or peoples lose their way with medicines. There's a place that you can go to relearn about it, and that place is called Manitoulin Island. I guess people, whether they're Mayan or Bree in Costa Rica, they're well aware of Manitoulin, and they will even have maps that are etched in stone in the side of a cliff that is an instruction manual how to get to Manitoulin Island. Basically, you have the Great Lakes, and the georegion of the Great Lakes is, well, the Great Lakes, but everything north to the tundra, everything out east to the Atlantic, everything out west to the plains, and everything south to the mountain range that separates temperate from tropical forests. That's the Anishinaabe, that's our georegion, that's where we live, and that's all of the medicines that exist in this entire georegion are very well known for all growing on Manitoulin Island. Manitoulin Island is a small island in the middle of Lake Huron, and on Manitoulin, it's known for its floral diversity. It's being studied by different groups from all around the world. Anytime you see a Tilly hat on Manitoulin, it's always a botanist, and they can almost never speak English. They'll just say botany, fleur. Manitoulin is known for having every single plant that occurs in our entire georegion. It all grows on Manitoulin. There's 17 wildflowers that grow there that don't grow anywhere else in the entire world, endemic to Manitoulin. Even an island that's 30 meters offshore will not grow, only on Manitoulin. One of those flowers blooms for 3 days, once every 10 years. And people come from all over that was 2 years ago. People come from all over the world to watch that flower bloom. So Manitoulin is a really special place. A lot of people will say Manitoulin, Manidonis, we'll call it. Manido means spirit. So people will say Manitoulin is a spirit island. My understanding and interpretation of that is there's a rock that we have called Manido Aadziwin, so a spirit rock. It's called a magnet. And what that Manido is describing, the word we use to describe a spirit, it's not Manido is a spirit. Manido is a word that describes a process. And so Manido, when you just look at the word, the reason why we use it to describe a magnet is because there is a force that you can observe, that you could feel, but you can't see it. But you can feel and notice the effects of it. That's a Manido Aadziwin, a magnet. And so I think our understanding of a spirit is a force that you can observe the effects of, but that you cannot actually see it. And so we call spirit Manido. And I think Manitoulin is a mystery as well. No one knows why all of these different plants grow on Manitoulin Island and nowhere else. And then how can every plant from this very diverse georegion all grow on this one little place? It's a mystery. So I think there are forces to understand about forces on Manitoulin that we can observe, but that we just cannot fully see and understand how this happens. So we call it Manitoulin Island. And so that was my home. That's where I grew up. And I grew up in Wiki, Wikwemkong, which a lot of places will consider Wikwemkong as being one of the greatest, perhaps maybe one of these days will be the last cultural hub. A lot of knowledge comes from Manitoulin. So, or sorry, comes from Wikwemkong. So like even in Peterborough, we have like you know how there's like Little Italy and Little Chinatown. In Peterborough, there's like a little wiki where there's always people from wiki that collect cultural knowledge during their life there, and then they'll go and teach it somewhere else. So we're the official colonizers of Anishinaabe Aadziwin, our knowledges. And that was my home wiki. And then my grandma is Thakala Pheasant, and she was one of the last people that was in my community who really understood medicine in that colloquial sense, in that everyday sense. And that was my grandma. So going from this idea or this perspective of the whole world kind of gesturing to Manitoulin or the Great Lakes area for medicine, all of those medicines growing on Manitoulin, the cultural hub of our nation, Wikwemkong, and then right down to my family and then my grandma, and all those circumstances. This was just like put on my lap. And so I've taken that and just kind of ran with it for the past decade. And it's been tremendously successful. But I kind of want to take that perspective from the entire planet, looking into my community and our island as being a medicine place. And I want to kind of walk you through. I'll give you guys a little break here in a second, but I would just I'll take the next just short little bit, and I'll walk you through the reason for medicine and the reason why all of that has taken place. I think that'll give us a really good perspective as to our worldview and some of the ideas, some of the reasons why these ideas are so persistent and valuable, not just for Anishinaabe and for our ability to accept and retain this knowledge, but I think as a basic responsibility for everybody who is trying to live in this part of the world, that connection to Anishinaabe Aadziwin, or our knowledge, is a crucial component for your ability to access or live the life that this land is able to provide for you. So yeah, just kind of wanted to shift gears for a little bit and explain a little bit of the whys, I guess. So with the way that we understand things is how do I say? Well, I'll say it this way. You know, one time there was like a real tragedy. I think we were at a wedding, family wedding, and something happened. Forget what, but my grandma was just crying, which is really unusual for me. I don't really see that too often, so it was kind of crazy. And then everybody left, just me and my crying grandma in the room. And she said, "You want to know something? You want to know what torture is?" She gave me a definition of torture. She said it's when you have kids and then, sorry, she didn't just stop there, but it's when you have kids and you know what their gifts are, and you have to watch your whole life never having the opportunity to see your kids express their gifts, to live a life where they don't have any opportunities to express those gifts. That's the way she defined torture. And you know, watching your kids never live to their fullest potential. And so, you know, us with our daughter is a huge focus for us, is to, you know, any opportunity, any interest that she has, we pour everything we can into it, because we want, well, I don't want to have to feel that or go through what my grandma went through. And so we really took that seriously, but we also apply it to plants. I think it's pretty clear that or well, I guess I'll just spell it out for everybody, is that our idea and our understanding, the way that these kinds of things work is every plant has a gift to be able to share with you, as being a significant medicine. And we're the only species that can provide that plant an opportunity to express those gifts. And so human beings are the only creatures that are able to have and maintain a reciprocal relationship with a plant, so that we're allowing it to express the gifts that it has of being medicines, and living to their fullest potential, while also we are living to our fullest potential. All of these plants are correcting certain organs, systems, and processes that your body has or goes through are corrected. And so we're able to achieve health, and we're able to help with all of those plants. I think one of the main things that I wanted everyone to be introduced to, or even just to fully understand, is our this is the way that I like to say is one of our basic responsibilities of being people living in this part of the world, is to always be giving plants an opportunity to live to their fullest potential, to express gifts that they would have that they would have otherwise never have the ability to express. So in order to really understand what I said, is because lots of animals use plants as medicine. What makes humans different, what makes us different, is that we're the only creatures that are able to begin and maintain a reciprocal relationship with a plant, where we're able to help it while it is helping us. Other plants are confined to instinct, and they will simply run species into extinction. Like, so it's made famous, the caribou study on one of the islands in Lake Superior. The population just grew and grew and grew and grew, until in one moment everything collapsed, because they just ate all of the food until all the food went extinct, and the entire populations on all of those islands completely collapsed in less than a year. So we're outside of the realms of instinct, where we're able to identify a particular species of plant, identify its medicinal value, and then give it an opportunity to express those gifts while helping it at the same time. So it's just like, how do you say, basic human relationship stuff. Like whenever you, okay, so my wife gets mad at me when I say this, but I think it's true. And I know I'm not just speaking on behalf of myself when I say this, but I think that it's pretty fair to say that every relationship that we have probably begins selfishly, where you meet somebody and you small talk them. And your small talk is like, hey, where are you going to school? Or where do you work? What do you like doing? What are you an expert in? What do you love? And what you do when you're small talking somebody is you're trying to identify a gift that person has. And what you're looking for is if you can use that gift. If that gift is valuable for you, you pursue a relationship with that person. You say, well, this is who I am. This is where I went to school. This is what I'm an expert in. This is what I love doing. And your hopes are that this person needs you. Because say this person is talking and they're talking and they're about all the things that they've done. I've been a tradesperson working in the plumbing industry for 45 years. And then you think, in my home, I have a leak. I need this person to come and help me. So what do you do if you want that person to come and help you? You'll explain yourself to them in the hopes that they need you. Because if they need you and you need them, you can guarantee, like, I make the best lasagna on planet Earth, and your newfound plumber friend doesn't not know how to cook lasagna, but he loves it. And so you could see a very perfect opportunity. I'm going to get what I want, and he's going to get what he wants. He'll get the lasagna, I get the plumbing fixed. What a good relationship that we are going to begin. So I think that most relationships begin this way. We see something that we want in a person and we try to get it, but we get it by expressing ourselves and the potential gifts that we have. So with plants, this is definitely the way we pursue relationships with plants. If we're talking about fibromyalgia and arthritis and, you know, all the things that we talked about so far, we're going to be looking into the forest differently. We're going to say, well, if all of these plants created Western medicine as we know it now, all of these plants are the source of where this idea of industry medicine comes from. And you could bypass the business bias, you could bypass the profit-driven approach and go directly to the source. You're able to do things that you're able to do some very incredible things. And so I'll just turn that off for a second. So yeah, you're going to be able to do incredible things. And so what you do when you look at a plant is say, well, I wonder who that is. And I wonder what gift that plant has to offer me. I wonder what part of my body that plant will fix. And so, you know, just like other relationships, if you find out that, geez, I'll just go back. If you find out that this plant, where did I get my makakim das? This plant, if you find out the roots of this plant are used for your sciatica, back pain, and if you just put a little piece of those roots inside of your mouth, those saponins are absorbed sublingually, and within 5 or 10 minutes, all of the sciatic pain is gone. And you have NRF2 activation and of kappa B suppression, and you have this intense opportunity for that tissue to be able to heal, and you never have sciatica again because you put a little pea-sized piece of this root inside of your mouth. What an incredible gift. Do you know anybody with sciatica who has these issues? Now you know a really important plant that can help support that person. So you find out, oh, makakim das, pitcher plants, that's a back pain medicine. What a good gift. You know, I got road trips coming up. I want to use that to fix my back. and so yeah, what a good gift. Now what you have to do is just like in any other relationship is you have to look at this plant and say, well, I wonder what I could give you in return. And this is where the really amazing piece of plant medicine comes into play. Is see that flower? That flower turns into a seed pod. In the center of it, there's a seed pod. There can be 800 different seeds inside. Every plant has a problem, a reproductive problem that only humans can solve. So most of our seeds are predated upon. They are eaten by mice and birds, and they are digested and destroyed. What this plant does is it's a very competitive for space. It's a carnivorous plant, meaning that it eats bugs. That's where it gets all of its nutrition from. So it doesn't need to be green. And what it tries to do is grow in really, really harsh environments. That's where it likes to be, where there's no other plants. It likes to be by itself. It doesn't want competition. And that's why it has created these adaptive strategies, being a carnivore, to be able to live in some of those really dangerous places to be. So doesn't like competition for space, but yet it makes 800 seeds on that stalk. And if those seeds fall within 1 foot of the parent plant, the parent will hormonally sterilize those seeds because it can't have that many kids growing right next to it. The seeds have to land over 1 foot away from the parent. So what it does is make this big, long stalk, and the stalk can be 18 inches, 2 feet long. And what it tries to do is drop those seeds far away from the parent. That's what it wants to do. But you could see in some of the video that was playing earlier, you can see this year's stem, you could see last year's stem, you could see 4 years ago, this plant will still have stems that are erect. That's the problem. Because what this plant is literally just waiting for is some random moose knuckle to accidentally hit the flower so those seeds land far away where they're able to germinate and properly grow. The stem is too rigid. So what we could do is just look at this plant and say, you know, rather than waiting for a moose knuckle, we could take those seed pod, take 800 of those little babies and plant them farther away and just spread the seeds, not in the immediate, on top of the immediate plant, but just surrounding. And by understanding the problem that this plant has, being there to solve it, so helping the plant, we're also gaining access to something that could really help us with the back pain. And so we've used this strategy, thrown a bunch of the seeds around a bog just between mine and Professor McGregor's house. Little bog that we found. We took it had like half a dozen of these pitcher plants in there, and we essentially covered it with like 10,000 in 3 years. It's an impenetrable wall carpet of this plant. And so it's really easy to give gifts back to plants. And I think that that's what separates people from most other animals, is that we're able to have to be able to develop and then maintain a reciprocal relationship with the plants, where we're helping them while they are helping us. And then this can even be projected into a bigger scenario where we're looking at the basic responsibility piece of human beings living in this part of the world are designed to be in constant consultation with all of the plants that are here. And you know, if you move somewhere, you have to bring your medicines with you. They have to be growing around where you live. That's what causes an environment to be suitable to raise a family, is access to plants to use as medicine for all the sickness and injury. And so one of the basic and intrinsic responsibilities of people living in this part of the world is a constant, continuous diversification of territory, not just for, you know, the pollinators and the animals and everybody else that relies on that plant diversity, but for us, so that we have all of our medicines. So it's just a basic responsibility. The way that this looks in our creation story is, and it's actually really remarkable if you think about, you know, if you have access to, you know, your kind of origin, culture, creation story. Every creation story that I've ever consulted with so far has this idea kind of embedded into it, nearly everyone, where in the Anishinaabe creation story, you have the first little Anishinaabe person, the first human sitting inside of a shell. And then the creator breathes spirit into that person to cause us to be the being that we are. And that's how we were created. When I was taught about our creation story, and any Anishinaabe kind of important story like that, is there's a story of like, yeah, Anishinaabe was created, and then the creator breathes spirit, and then that's us. There's like the simple story, but there's details to that story. They're surrounded by certain trees. The Anishinaabe is sitting inside of a shell. And then and so all of those details, you have to, when you receive a creation story, you have to ask what those details are. That's where the real knowledge and experience of the story is. So when you spend your life learning all of those details and what they represent as a part of that story. And the shell, when I asked what the shell is, that shell is a representation of everything that was already created up until that point. Humans were the last thing to be created. And so in our creation story, because of what the shell represents, the human beings are a culmination of creation. We are a culmination of all of the elements that make up Earth. Everything that was created was used to form our body. And then the creator breathes spirit, and then everything is all good. So that's kind of like what happens. And then, you know, like in my religious authority conversation, in my experience in theologies, working with the one community, that's one of the components that we utilized, was in the Genesis story and biblical text, is a moment where God said, let us make man in our image. And in the progression of that story, of the Genesis story, the only thing that was created at that point was creation itself. And so, you know, while most Christian theologies will acknowledge a Trinity being, the Holy Trinity being who that consultation between God was with, the Trinity, there's a more literal interpretation of that story to say, well, the only thing that was actually created at that point was creation itself. Possibly angelic beings were there as well, but you see that kind of consultation happening. And so a responsibility for human beings is to remember those origin, where we came from, and also to maintain a connection to those origin. You say all of the plants that were used to form parts of our body. We're supposed to be in constant consultation with those source plants. If this plant was used to form, like If we look at our nerve medicine we talked about earlier, soaking people with diabetic neuropathy and then they walk home, this tamarack bark, if you look at the structure of it, you cannot really see it from this kind of B-roll image, which is sad. But the way the branches are structured, they have a really particular and unique in the plant world wave type pattern to them. The trunk of the tree spirals like myelin on every motoneuron in your body. The branching pattern of the branches out of the trunk of the tree is shaped like the dendritic pattern of dendritic cells coming off of the axon, off of the cell body. And if you look at, so everything from the wave pattern of the branches to the spiraling of the trunk and the branching patterns themselves, everything about this tree looks like motor neurons, which are affected. And when they are experiencing disease or decline, degeneration, you have something like peripheral neuropathy. And so in our understanding, what we're doing is we're consulting with the source. If this plant was responsible for creating our nerves, this plant has contained within its tissues, an original instruction manual in the form of exogenous chemistry. So we consult with that instruction manual and we say, well, if tamarack was used to form this parts of my body, then I am going to harvest that original instruction, and those instructions come into my body and cause that part to work appropriately, to work properly. And so I just kind of wanted to run through a couple cool, I think we could go here. So if we're looking at all of these different plants then, and Anishinaabe worldview and perspectives on the natural world, all of these different plants were used to form parts of our body. That's our creation story. And so these plants have an original instruction in the form of exogenous chemistry, and were designed to be in constant consultation with those. So this is a demshkike, this is a heart medicine. Nimepin is a medicine for your heart. So when you first look at the leaves, they have a heart-shaped leaf. And it's like, oh, well, there's so many plants that have a heart-shaped leaf. But if you move the leaves and you look at the roots don't go underground. They stay on top of the ground, and they have this bluish greenish color to them. And when you move the leaves, they kind of just looks like vasculature, on somebody's arm or on somebody's leg. And then the most curious shape about this plant is the flower shape. It has this Mercedes-Benz looking structure. This you don't see too often in the natural world, or looking at any other plant, this Mercedes-Benz looking shape. And so what we do then is we look at our body. You could see the heart-shaped leaves, the vasculature in somebody's arm, but also the valve work, the tricuspid valves, having the only part of your body that has that Mercedes-Benz structure are your tricuspid valves. And then you look at other heart medicines like Ditte Begons, and you're looking at Ditte Begons, I forget what it's called. Little Canada, violets. These violets have a heart shape to them. They have really interesting looking roots. And then the bud looks like a little duckbill. It just sits on the top of the plant. And when it opens to distribute the seeds, it opens in that Mercedes-Benz looking structure. Striped maple as well. You could see the image of another heart medicine, our Mosmish striped maple. And you can see, like, who has ever seen bark on a tree that looks like that? We have that tree here. And we found many specimens throughout even the GTA. This plant is probably aesthetically one of the most striking, pleasing trees that we have here due to those bright blue lines going up and down. This is a heart medicine. It's like for your blood vessels. And you could see the identity of that embedded into the geometry or the structure and color of it. So all of these different plants that I shared, Nimepin, Mosmish, Ditte Begons, all of these are really important heart medicines. And without getting too lost into the weeds, I don't know how many of you are familiar with health sciences, but heart disease is the #1 killer in Canada and the US and in every developed country. For perspective, I think COVID deaths each year in Canada was like 5,000. Or maybe 10,000 in some overestimates. But when you're looking at cardiovascular disease, it's like 120, sometimes 150,000 people die every year from this in Canada. And so if there was any kind of support that we could provide to the system, we would be supporting an opportunity to heal from, or maybe even live with. And if it was just a general support for cardiovascular disease, this would elevate all of these different plants to being probably some of the most important species, to which, in my experience, I think that they are. You see some of the most incredible results from cardiovascular disease by using some of these medicines, and all they do is protect your endothelial cells from sugar. From hyperglycemia, which is a really interesting mechanism to fully understand, changes our perspectives on the pathophysiology of cardiovascular disease. Where did these diseases come from? I think a lot of these medicines give us kind of a blueprint to really understand disease pathophysiology when you're able to understand what these plant medicines do inside of your body, how they help you heal. If we can understand how they can help you heal, we can understand where the disease is actually coming from. In this case, almost exclusively hyperglycemia. Or high blood sugar. But anyways, I kind of wanted to share this idea with you guys really quickly. This idea that these plants are, or the idea of plant medicines as being nothing but a consultation with an original instruction in the form of exogenous chemistry and source plants. So Winsecans is our lung medicine, or pan if you're from the north. These ones are, this is an example of a failed drug discovery attempt. So is the pitcher plants from earlier, the sciatica medicine. That one we identified, or they identified, the field, identified that there are, in the pitcher plant, the sciatica medicine from earlier, there's a type of saponin that's absorbed sublingually that prevents the inoculation or draws out calcium from every sensory neuron in your lumbar. So all pain that's being registered in that part of your body is drawn out, and pitcher plants seem to establish a shunting mechanism to prevent the reinoculation of calcium into the sensory neurons, or to prevent that pain from reaccumulating again in the future, as well as inhibiting the toxic effects of glucose on that particular nerve tissue, allowing it to be able to recover and heal and lower inflammation and these sorts of things. This one, the lung medicine, is essentially the same thing, where these roots are what we use to make tea. And this has, its Latin name is Polygala senega snake root. We call it Winsecans. They identified, again, a group of saponins, 5 of them in particular, that clean your lungs, that mediate growth factors in the tissue of your lungs, allowing for the rejection of scar tissue, abnormal growths, like in the form of tumors and polyps. So the chemistry that this plant has is an incredible support for your lungs. And there are 5 saponins in particular that all of this function is attributed to. And this is a failed drug discovery attempt because they were not able to create a profitable synthetic mimetic of the chemistry found in this plant. So we cannot get our lungs cleaned at the physician. What this plant does is those senega saponins, when you drink them, they hit your stomach, and they are irritants. They irritate the lining of your stomach in a very special way that sends signals through the vagus nerve to tell your lungs to secrete mucus in the alveoli. That mucus mixes with pollutants like brake dust and smog and tar from tobacco and cannabis, maybe chronic cannabis use. So that mucus will mix with pollutants, and you expectorate the mixture of mucus and pollutants, essentially cleaning your lungs out. And within a few days, you take a smoker who sounds like they're drowning every time that they laugh, to just within a few days, I saw one at the grocery store, my friend, and he came up to me and he was like, that's how he said hi. And I was like, what the heck? Oh, nasty smelling old coffee breath. And it was he was showing me his lungs were clear. That's what he needed, and it was over. Lung cancer is the least survivable form of cancer that we have. And we have a surprising anecdote, I think, of almost 24 people throughout Ontario who are usually getting their treatments at London, I think London has a very specialized lung cancer therapy, and we can be in addition to that therapy. Everyone who has accepted, you know, the team of oncologists there who have allowed people to use, because it's terminal, you're going to die. When we use this medicine, they recover quite well. And it's just a simple mediation of growth factors. That's all we need to do. When growth factors are mediated, something like vasoendothelial growth factor is rejected from entering into the polyp or entering into the tumor. And so when something like VEGF or vasoendothelial growth factor is cut off, it's hormonally rejected, all of that tissue becomes necrotic and dies. And folks seem to respond to this medicine really good, you know, for scar tissue, tumors, other growths, polyps, quite common. And so really incredible lung medicine. So an example of failed drug discovery is my favorite area, because now with this perspective, if we're able to access the source, we're able to do things that physicians can't, like fix arthritis, lung problems, back pain, these sorts of things, because these plants are not hindered by a business bias. But what I wanted us to see about that lung medicine is the structure of the flowers is pretty interesting. They're little empty sacs of air. They're pretty meaningless, other than that that's where the seed will eventually grow. It's meaningless because it's a self-pollinated plant that really doesn't need to put this effort into creating those flowers. But it does, and those little empty sacs of air all clustered at the tip of each stem is a part of this plant's story. So what I want us all to understand is that every plant has a story to share. Every plant is telling you who they are. They're telling you what their gift is. If you just take like 3 seconds and stop on the trail and spend time with that plant and listen to it, they don't communicate with us with words, with English. It will be much in the same way as trying to communicate to somebody who is deaf and you do not know ISL, or somebody who is nonverbal and has autism. How do you communicate with these people when they do not talk in English? What you do is you watch all of their facial expressions, all of their body language, and you take everything that they're doing, all of the sounds that they make, and you interpret that. You interpret what they're doing to try to create the story of what they are describing. For me and my deaf auntie, I'm almost always wrong. I just start texting her right in front of her. But with us and with plants, it's pretty well the same thing. You know, you're looking at a plant and you're trying to figure out who it is, what it is. It's communicating those things to you. If you just give it a second and listen, you'll be able to see. So I guess it's clear what I'm trying to show you is no roots have corrugations like this on the roots. It does not make any sense. Some roots are lubricated because of what they do inside of the soil. For it to be corrugated, it makes no ecological sense other than to give us an opportunity to understand this is the plant that created this part of our body. And because it was that source consultation, it has embedded with it original instruction. When there's something wrong with my lungs, I am going to use this to help this part of my body work properly. Same thing with our kundimo, our muscle medicines. It's kind of it's kind of really fascinating to see all of the shapes and structures of all of the different plants that we use as medicine. This is a muscle medicine. We use it in geriatrics most often, sometimes athletes. But this really helps to, you know, lower your leucine threshold, allow for much more effective muscle protein synthesis that goes down as you age. And so this makes sure that that doesn't happen. So you maintain strength throughout the aging process. Looking at the shape of the roots, the basic structure of all of these plants is the exact same as the basic structure of, these are muscle fibers, one muscle fiber, of which I'm pretty sure, you know, to see alveoli and muscle fibers, you need an electron microscope, but these are the consultations we've been accomplishing for years. Liver medicines, like Beneacit and Zawajipkans, you have these plants that have, you know, we call them kun skikke. Kun is your bones, but kun is your liver. So you see 3 lobes, just like your liver, a really interesting shape of a flower, of a hexagon. And then on the Zawajipkans, you have the 3-lobed leaves and the kind of hexagon-shaped flower and yellow roots. And so when you're looking at all of our liver medicines, this is a basic structure of the liver. On top there is a lobule. They have a hexagon structure. They all pack on top of each other until they eventually will make a liver. And then obviously attached to your liver, you have a gallbladder, which is full of bile salts, which tend to carry a bright yellow color to them. But when you're looking at all of our liver medicines, you see a repetition of basic structures. And so this is kind of like really what I wanted us to be able to see, is that all of these different plants are the source for creating certain parts of our body. And the process of using them as medicine is simple. So like I could probably even ask all of you, like we'll just do the last one here. The way that this process works, when you want to listen to a plant and know what it's good for, which part of your body it is designed to heal, which part of your body, according to our worldview, that this plant is responsible for creating, you look at it and you say, well, what makes you special? You look at all these different plants and you say, well, I wonder what makes you special. I wonder what makes you unique. What separates you from all the other plants around you? And if you could identify what that uniqueness is, then you could identify what they're saying, essentially. So with this one, with Anishinaabe cedar, probably most of us are at least quasi-familiar with cedar. If you're looking at this plant and you want to figure out who it is, which part of your body that it is designed to heal, you just ask, what makes you special? What makes you unique and different than all of the other plants? So one of the things most people realize is that cedar is an evergreen. So it's like with Christmas trees and pine trees, cedar trees, junipers, those are all firs, those are all evergreen trees. Now, what separates cedar from all of the other evergreen trees? What makes cedar unique and different from all of the other evergreens? And if you could identify that uniqueness, then it is through that uniqueness that these plants are communicating to us. So what makes it special is that it doesn't have needles, right? It has green, flat, scaly looking leaves. And so if we look at that and say, well, I wonder what part of my body that you're designed to heal. And if you're looking at your body, it's pretty clear. Your lymphatic system is green, it's flat, it's scaly, it has valve work and duct work, and exactly the same branching pattern as cedar leaves. Cedar, we use it for, it's really important for energy absorption and utilization, like for long walks, moving places. It's really important for your immune system when you're sick to get you better faster. And it's important for like everyday functions and uses in smoke medicines and in baths to help a very important detoxification process in your body. So all of that is your lymphatic system. Your lymphatic system is responsible for absorbing fats from the foods that you eat and transporting them into the muscle to actually be used as fuel. So energy absorption and utilization. Your lymphatic system is what your immune system uses as a highway. So when you get better, or when you get sick, you use this as a medicine to get better faster, and a really important detoxification support. So your lymphatic system is a detoxification system, among other duties. Cedar opens these little vestigial doors, allowing lymph to be evacuated into a sweat gland. So rather than taking those toxic components collected, take some days to travel through your lymphatic system before it gets dumped back into your blood, and then your liver and your kidneys have to deal with that toxic load. Cedar allows all of that to just be emptied out and expelled through your skin. So it doesn't take days, and so it's expedited, but it also doesn't tax your kidneys and liver with a greater toxic load. It's all thrown out through your skin. So this is why we use it in sweat lodges. It's why it's the wood used in a sauna, and anything else is heresy. So, but you could see that identity kind of just embedded into the tissue of that plant, right? So I kind of wanted to, we could just take 1 second. You could use the chat if you're not driving. Use the chat for a second, and I want you guys to kind of practice this just for a moment. What does it require for you to be able to listen to plants, to be able to identify the gifts that they have? Because if you could identify the gifts that those plants have, then of course, number one, you could access them to help live a better life in this part of the world, but also you can enter into a relationship with that plant and begin to help it and be there for it every year and watch it grow, watch it spread, watch it be more successful, take it to areas where you know that it's missing. And that responsibility of constant diversification of territory, we can begin that but we got to be able to listen to plants first. So if you just take a second and think about a birch tree, probably most of us are familiar with what a birch tree looks like. But take a birch tree, use your chat, and why don't you tell me what one of the most significant, what makes birch unique? What is birch's signature feature? What separates birch from all of the other plants that are and trees that are around it? Yeah, the bark. There we go. The bark's very thin. It peels easily. The color of the bark. Yeah, the bark. The bark is really special. Super, super unique and important component of birch. So now that we have identified what makes birch special is the bark, what part of your body do you think that this tree would provide support to? Yeah, absolutely. This is wild. Birch, we make tea with the bark and we put that tea in the bathtub. And that's what I was mentioning earlier, the foolproof skin issue, eczema, psoriasis, scar tissue. I had a cutter who cut every centimeter or so, had these giant caterpillar scars on both arms, legs from a trauma, childhood trauma. She was like 25, healed from it all, but has that memory. And she used birch bark in her bath for a couple months. I think it was, between 6 and 8 months. Those scars got smaller and smaller and smaller until they were replaced with normal, healthy skin. No sign of this. Acne scarring was a common COVID vaccine injury with women. So we've had to use lots of birch over the past couple of years for the acne scarring. Think of anything that you could, any issue to do with the skin. I have a decade of the most tremendous experiences with this. Birch is the best thing you could ever do for your skin. And you, oh, awesome. So yeah, you figured that out on your own. I'll do another one. So another one would be like willow. If you think about a willow tree, just take a second, think about willow, and think about what makes willow special. What makes willow different than all of the other trees that are around it? If you could find out what makes willow unique, you could identify what its gift is, and utilize it for that gift, enter into a relationship with that plant. What makes willow special? The hanging branches and leaves. Expand on that a little bit more. The branches, what about the branches? What makes willow special and unique, different than all of the other plants that are around it? Hair, Henry's jumping right into the, so yeah, Aptaven says the hanging branches and leaves. And when I asked to expand on that a little bit more, they are flexible, it says. So if, Buddy is bang on, they're flexible. So willow has compounds inside of the bark that enable it so it doesn't freeze until it's exposed to beyond minus 80 degrees Celsius. So even in the middle of winter, it's still full of water and it's still very flexible. So that's what makes willow unique and special, different than everybody else. Wicker chairs, wicker baskets. We use it to make hoops and sweat lodge frames and like all this stuff where you require a certain flexibility in the branch. So now that we've identified what makes willow special and unique, what kind of diseases do you think you're going to use willow for? Connective tissue health? Expand on that again, my friend. Arthritis. Absolutely. You guys got it. We talked about arthritis earlier. The primary ingredient is willow. We didn't know what drove the mechanisms that drove arthritis until 2016, I think, or 2014. It's the University of New Delhi, University of in the States, that identified that the driving force of the disease is an influx of neutrophilic cells to the joint that essentially spray acid everywhere, degrade the joint, and the opportunity for that joint to recover from the stressor of the neutrophilic cells spraying acid everywhere grows back in a deformed state, or in a deformed way. And so when you're looking at something like willow, it was New Delhi in like 2016, 2018 or something like that, very recently, that identified willow after consulting with their indigenous groups. Willow is what we use for arthritis, and willow inhibits that influx of neutrophilic cells and mediates growth factors within connective tissue, allowing extra tissue that is limiting range of motion to be hormonally rejected and reabsorbed. As that happens, range of motion comes back, and we're nice and flexible, just like willow. So little things like that. This is why we are so connected to plants, and the whole process of medicine is because they are a part of us. And we have an opportunity to connect with, to consult with the source, to enter into a reciprocal relationship with a plant and establish an opportunity where human health and environmental health increase simultaneously, where we have constant diversification of territories, and where a variety of organs, systems, and processes that our body has and goes through are under constant correction. So the last thing that I wanted to be able to share with everybody is this here. If you want to really understand what medicine, kind of that experience is like, and in a kind of total scale, here we harvested medicines, about 119 different species of our most significant medicines. We harvested for about 2 months. So we had 119 species, and we got a big pot. Like, this pot is so big, like a small family can fit inside, if you wanted to. So anyways, your massive pot, we put all of the medicines in, and I instructed my daughter, when we put all these medicines in, you're going to repeat after me the names of everything. So she put cedar in. So I gave her the cedar, the bag of cedar, and said, Gi Shagandak, Eastern white cedar, Thuja occidentalis. And so she would put them in. Gi Shagandak, Eastern white cedar, Thuja occidentalis. Her Latin sucked though, so that took her a little while to be able to say. And then that took us 5 hours to get all of the medicines in with that process. All of our phones overheated. And then we cook it all, and then we strain it all out, squeeze it. I use a cider press to squeeze out all the juices, and then we bring it inside. Inside of this pot is a representation of all of our most significant medicine species. Inside of this pot is essentially all of our medicines, all of that instructions. Inside of this pot, there's a representation of every organ, system, and process that your body has and goes through. And that original instruction, in the form of all of these plants' exogenous chemistry, comes in to inform every organ, system, and process we have and go through to work properly. And so all of that is represented here. And essentially we cooked it between 75 and 85 degrees Celsius for another 2 months. So this took 4 months out of the year, completely, all day, all night, completely dedicated to this process. We eventually reduced this medicine until all of the water was evaporated, and you have this thick black paste. And so inside of this jar is a representation of all of that chemical instruction, all of those source materials for, and what would be, it would be cool if I could share this with you guys, but this is a representation. It's kind of like the whole world looking to the Great Lakes for medicine, all of those medicines being on Manitoulin, and me being from one of those last places. I was the first person to create this medicine in my family in 45 years. And I was the first person to create it in my community in almost 20 years. And this resurgence of culture, this resurgence of knowledge and connection to territory has I think this year, I'm aware of almost 30 families who are making this medicine now. And so this idea is coming back. It's coming back super strong and powerful. And the responsibility of this is a medicine that every family used to have, and every family used to make once every decade. And you ate a little bit of it every single day. You were accomplishing consultation with the source plant for every single organ, system, and process your body has and goes through. This is what medicine looks like. It's a normal, it's a colloquial thing, and it's a constant, continuous responsibility. And if the knowledge is able to reach the people who occupy this part of the world, where we are able to establish and maintain reciprocal relationships with hundreds of different plants, the constant diversification of territory, the alleviation of this healthcare burden and crisis that we're in. I see this, of course, I'm very biased to say this, but I think Anishinaabe Aadziwin, or our medicine knowledge, is very, very important. and it illustrates our need, our attention to the basic responsibilities of our knowledge and how that could impact your ability and opportunity to live here. And so 12:07, what the heck? My bad. So yeah, and I kind of wanted to, yeah, just walk you guys through a quick little exercise there so that you can kind of like, yeah, you figured that out yourself. You now know that without even me telling you the medicine that is that can potentially eliminate the arthritis burden from not just Indigenous people, but from anybody living in this part of the world. You identified for yourself a very important skin medicine. Your skin is the second largest organ that you have. Chances are, if you support that properly, a lot of other health components will come into alignment. You figured that out for yourself. So I want you to feel equipped and powerful enough to just, when you're spending time outside, just to take 2 seconds and just think about it a little bit more. Look at the structures, look at the geometry, the colors, the relationships that plant has with other creatures, behavioral patterns that it has. And you'll be able to uncover the story of that plant. And inside of that story is embedded a very crucial knowledge that is capable of allowing you an opportunity to live a good life in this part of the world. So hopefully that helps. It'd be cool if there was like a couple burning questions. I had a couple DMs come in that I try to answer on the fly, so I hope I did that.
Oh. Someone wanted to know how willow was used. So go ahead, he's raised hands. So let me just see. So Athivin, and then Dania, and then Schwab. So probably we've got time for at least 3.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Joseph, for the learnings today about the plant medicines. And I guess, like, excuse me, one of the questions that I had, especially knowing about like the colonial history of like taking knowledge from Indigenous peoples and then using that for personal gain and for capital gain, how could we, if we want to engage with these traditional medicines, how would we do that in a respectful way and in a way that like follows the correct protocols? And if you have any, I guess, advice for that.
Yeah, so I think this is probably one of my biggest responsibilities and biggest controversies, is to correctly identify the answer to your question. I do the best that I can. I think Indigenous folks are most concerned with the survivability of species. So if everybody learns how effective these medicines are, perhaps they'll go extinct, like golden seals and ginsengs and elm, slippery elm. Like, we've lost over a dozen species due to just over harvesting because of their tremendous value. So we're trying to be very cautious in how this kind of data set is rolled out. And me probably being one of the most influential speakers on this topic, expressed the most amounts of caution. And hence my focus for this presentation on your responsibility to that relationship. I mean, we all know, if somebody in your life, if you enter into a relationship with somebody and they do nothing but take and take and take, and they're not giving you anything in return, they just suck all the life out of you and all the money out of your wallet. Eventually, it doesn't matter if it's your children, if it's your parents, if it's your best friend, if this is the kind of relationship that you're in, eventually they're going to get cut off. And you're not going to give them anything else anymore. Plants are the same way. If you're not giving anything back, they're just going to cut you off. They do that by going extinct. So to identify that responsibility in that relationship, and to use just basic human relationship kind of common sense components to help us understand, well, yeah, if we're taking something from them, we have to help them as well. And when you're following and when you learn this protocol of harvesting, there is a protocol for every plant, and if you follow that protocol, that plant next year is 10-fold, 400-fold, 1,500-fold. Like, you can really spread a species and help it be extremely successful. And And so that's really satisfying as well. You know, it's another relationship that you're in. I've had students identify in the past that the relationships that they were able to build with plants came with such a great responsibility, that we've had suicidal youth in contemplation stages. And when they were able to connect with the responsibility and rules of those relationships, that's what they have identified. What has kept them here is the more relationships, or when you do not have relationships and responsibilities in relationships, you have very little reason to stay here. And so when you apply those, I would say probably the mental health components of the responsibilities and rules of relationships between people and plants are probably, I don't know, I would even say one of the most valuable components. And so I try to really focus on that and connect people to this much bigger responsibility of diversification of territory to that comes with human health consequences, hopefully better human health. So there is, for every plant, a protocol of harvesting. And if you follow that protocol, there's going to be more of that plant for next year. And you could do even better. I haven't picked medicine in 3 years at all. We've done nothing but seed collection and distribution and helping, because COVID happened and I had medicine for years. I didn't need to go and pick. All we did was help. And those were the best relationships, you know, like all the grandmas and grandpas out there just slipping us 20s our whole childhood. Like, what? I didn't even do anything for that. You're just giving me a $20 bill. I'm 7. You know how many Mr. Freezies that I could buy with a $20 bill? And they just slip it to you, real sneaky. Like, those are amazing. So we want to be able to give those to plants as well, even though they're not helping us directly. They didn't do anything for us yet, but we could be there to help them, you know, slip them a couple 20s here and there and spread things around. It's just relationships. The more we have, the healthier we are, both with people and with plants.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like my question was already answered because I was going to ask, like, okay, you were speaking about how there weren't enough people to be able to give around the medicine, so you taught people. And so the question in the back of my head was like, okay, like, how do you make sure there's enough plants to pick and then give to people and all of that stuff? So I see that perfectly segued into it. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing my best, and to try to make sure that everything is happening properly. And so yeah, and honestly, that's the biggest question still today. And I don't have a clear answer. I can't trust anybody. I literally have one other person on the planet, you know, that I trust to harvest everything properly. And you know, that's in the past 2 decades of experience. And so that's going to be kind of my biggest hurdle, is how do we go about access, training, and things like that. Yeah, so figuring all that out, but hopefully there will be a kind of it would have to be a foolproof process from the very beginning. But Ontario is huge, and the populations of medicines that we have are so easy to maintain. I really don't see there being access issues because of the scarcity of plants, especially when you're looking at, you know, we're slowly rolling this out, like working with Indigenous healthcare priorities. And, you know, I got the top 10 Indigenous healthcare priorities and the plant medicines to fix that. And I provide training modules to the health center to train a traditional medicine administrative team, like who prescribes those plant medicines, Training goes to the clinicians as well to understand mechanisms and contraindications, and patients get access to motivation and inspiration to actually use the medicine being provided to them. And so when you're looking at the top 10 Indigenous healthcare priorities, all of those plants, none of them have a special concern around their populations. And it seems to be the more you pick, the more that grows. So sometimes the relationships are very easy to maintain. Sometimes, you know, you look at a plant the wrong way and then it dies. Like you can't even look at a birch the wrong way. They're so sensitive and then they're dead. So, but yet some plants, the worse you treat them, the better that they do. It's really tremendous. So some relationships are easy to maintain. Obviously, in a rollout of some of these ideas, that's really important. But yeah, that's the biggest concern there.
Shahab?
Thank you, Joseph. Very, very interesting story, and thanks for sharing your wisdom. You said at one point that you were probably the only person doing this stuff in your community, and then I know you ultimately started your own educative-based initiative. I'm just wondering, you know, out of curiosity, did the idea of ever starting a business, as in like turning it into a retail business, you know, opening stores and kind of scaling it that way, ever cross your mind? Because the reason I asked that is, you know, I'm sure you're already targeting a lot of people, but if you open it into more of a business initiative, you know, as in like a retail business, I'm sure the target would be even broader.
Yeah, for sure. So that'd be nice. But for me, if I say I had a storefront, the work that's required to be able to harvest everything, I would never be able to pick that much plants just on my own. And even if I had a team to hire, there still is the kind of traditional component of we don't use money to purchase medicines. And that tends to be a pretty big hindrance. And so as far as impact goes, with the barriers that you know, we have created ourselves as Indigenous people, but in some cases, but I think the best that I could do with what I got right now is to provide educations and trainings to a traditional medicine group already working within the health center, so that they could go and do this on their own and be the providers of that medicine for the health center, who, you know, all we need is a proper referral system process and trainings to the physician to be able to have that work together. That's where I'm at right now, with probably the best that I could do. Having a storefront and a scalable business in that way, it would be amazing, you know, if somebody could do that, but I can't do that because I could do much better. You know, right now we have a slow rollout working with 26 Indigenous health access centers to roll out this training module program, so that they can provide medicines to address the top healthcare priorities of that community. And as that, and then hopefully throughout the years kind of build upon that. But the storefront, your limitations are the amount of material produced for the dollar that you're going to get. It's like even this medicine that I shared with you here, we kind of priced it out. If I was paid minimum wage to make this, it was almost $12,000 per measured teaspoon of that. I don't know what kind of business model would support the continuous production and distribution of that, but not anything that I could kind of make up. But this is why I kind of spent the majority of the earlier portion of this presentation talking about the family portion, the colloquial nature. This is just the way that medicine is. It just is. It's everywhere. It's everyone's basic responsibility. And by the time you're 12 years old, you should already have all the knowledge you require to be your own physician, and already creating and maintaining all of your relationships to all of those different plants. It's just kind of like a basic human responsibility. And I think that if we were able to get to a point where people were expressing that, which we seem to be traveling towards pretty quickly, that's the place to be.
I was just wondering, also many thanks for the presentation, how willow is used. Like you
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully you could hear me, because you broke up pretty good there. But thanks for the recording. But yeah, the willow, if you look up Creator's Garden blog, I have an arthritis salve article on there. People from all over the world have been making it. There's comments on that thread from a woman from Africa and a guy from Russia who used the species equivalents of their territory to make it, and shared their success as well. But all of the instructions are there. Like if you want to make that salve, it's super. If you can make soup, you can make this. It's so easy. And people have been making it literally and actually all over the world, which has been pretty cool. But yeah, all of the instructions are there. It's so simple to make. And we have multiple facilitators just kind of all across the province and outside of the province, into this outside of the country, where they teach people how to make this in little groups, and that's their primary job. It's really cool. But it's pretty easy to make, and I think if you check out the blog, you'll be able to see like, oh, let's get some plants, throw them in some warm oil, and don't make all the mistakes that I've made, which I'm pretty clear all of the mistakes that I've made in the past. So yeah, you could find that for sure.
You would never know that you weren't really into plants from this, but we didn't even get the passion. We didn't even get the birds. So it's so I want to thank you for this. I think this was, I'm pretty sure like everyone could do their reactions, clap and just say, I think this was really helpful for students in this journey that they have for, being a good ancestor on this in this place, and ensuring future generations can be well as well. I know you got another commitment at 1 o'clock, so I just chimigwech for this. Yeah, just totally amazing. Again, I don't know, I'll probably still say he loves plants because you understand their gifts, but maybe it's birds.
Yeah, I do now. It seems to be because I have to.
Sometimes responsibilities, you sometimes don't necessarily always feel like you have a choice about them, but you have this gift, but then you can still pursue your interests, right? You can still do other cool stuff. So yeah, you're getting lots of comments. So appreciate this time with us, and I hope everyone enjoyed this as much as I did. I have tons of notes, and we'll be in touch after this, because I know you have another commitment, and I will see everyone next week. Hopefully next time I see you, Joseph, it'll be like as a human, like this person standing in front of me. I think it's only been Zoom the last little while. So
that'd be amazing.
Yeah. All right. Goodbye, everyone.